Everybody already knows what New Jersey is. The Turnpike. The refineries you see from the plane. The suburbs of two cities that both belong to somebody else. And a shore full of boardwalks in July. Here is the problem with that. Inside the same state, about 70 road miles apart, there is a county with 15,600 people per square mile and a township with 6. Not 6,000, 6. Here are 25 things about New Jersey that do not fit the state you think you know. Number 25. Start with the number everyone gets right. New Jersey is the most densely populated state in the country. 1,263 people per square mile on 7,354 square miles of land. 5th smallest state in the Union. That is the New Jersey people picture, and it is true. Now look inside it. Hudson County runs at 15,691 people per square mile. Denser than any American state and denser than Bangladesh. Washington Township in Burlington County has 693 residents across 101 square miles, 6.8 per square mile. Wyoming, the emptiest state in America, averages about 6. Same state, same governor, and you can drive between them in an afternoon. The ratio is roughly 2,300 to 1. Number 24. Now the number that breaks the picture entirely. The United States Forest Service inventories American forest, plot by plot, the same method in every state. Their 2020 report puts New Jersey at 1,974,000 acres. 42% of New Jersey's land is forest. Same agency, same protocol. Montana is 28%. Be careful with that because it is proportional, not absolute. Montana's 28% is 26 million acres, 13 times what New Jersey has. But a larger share of New Jersey is forest than of Montana. The densest state in America is also more forested, proportionally, than the one people picture when they say wilderness. Number 23. So how does that fit into a state this small? The New Jersey Geological Survey divides it into 4 physiographic provinces, and they are genuinely different countries. The valley and ridge, folded rock and linear ridges. The highlands, metamorphic ridges and deep narrow valleys. The Piedmont, rolling plain broken by volcanic ridges. And the coastal plain, 4,600 square miles of flat unconsolidated sand. 3/5 of New Jersey is that last one. Here is the part that should stop you. The rock in the highlands is between 1.2 billion and 900 million years old. The sediments of the coastal plain are 90 to 10 million. Those two things sit fewer than 40 miles apart. 100-fold difference in age inside a state you can cross in 90 minutes. Number 22. At the northwestern corner, the Delaware River goes straight through a mountain. The Delaware Water Gap, Mount Tammany on the New Jersey side, 1,527 feet. The river at the bottom, 290, so the notch is about 1,200 feet deep and a quarter of a mile wide at water level. The ridge it cuts through is held up by sandstone that has resisted erosion for 400 million years. The version you usually hear is that the river sawed its way down through a rising mountain. Jack Epstein of the United States Geological Survey mapped the ridge and found something more specific. The water gaps in the Kittatinny do not sit at random points. They sit where the rock was already structurally weak. The river did not beat the mountain. It found the one place the mountain was already broken. Number 21. Now the same state 30 miles from Manhattan. The Great Swamp National Wildlife Refuge in Morris County is about 7,800 acres. In 1968, Congress designated 3,660 of them as federal wilderness. Wilderness in the legal sense, the same category as the backcountry of the Rockies. It exists because in the late 50s the Port Authority wanted a jetport there, and local residents raised money, bought the land parcel by parcel, and handed it to the federal government specifically so it could never be built on. Hold on to the Great Swamp. In about 4 facts, you will find out why the ground there is flat and wet in the first place, and the reason is not what you would guess. Number 20. Now go much further back. Beneath the sand of southern New Jersey, geophysicists have mapped the basement rock using seismic surveys and drill cores. They found 3 blocks of crust that did not start out on this continent. They came off Gondwana, the southern supercontinent that included what became Africa, and were welded onto North America when the Iapetus Ocean closed and the Appalachians were built. Southern New Jersey is sitting on foreign crust. One honest limit. You cannot go and look at it. Those rocks are buried under the coastal plain, known only from boreholes and geophysics. Anyone who points a camera at a New Jersey outcrop and says that rock came from Africa is wrong. The evidence is real, the view is not available. Number 19. About 201 million years ago, Pangaea started to pull apart, and the crack ran right through here. It is called the Newark Basin, and it produced two things you can see from a car. The first is the Palisades. That wall of dark rock along the Hudson is not a lava flow, and not a cliff in the ordinary sense. It is a sill, magma that pushed sideways between layers of sediment underground and froze there, roughly 350 meters thick. It never erupted. The Hudson has since cut down through it, so you are looking at a cross-section of something that was never meant to be seen. The second thing it left, nobody films because it looks like grey mudstone. The lake sediments under central New Jersey record cycles that match the wobbles in Earth's orbit, and geologists use them to calibrate the timescale of the late Triassic. The dullest rock in the state is a clock, number 18. In 1838, a farmer dug very large bones out of a marl pit in Haddonfield. He did not know what they were. Some, reportedly, ended up as curiosities in his house. 20 years later, a Philadelphia lawyer named William Parker Falk heard the story while summering there and organized a proper excavation. What came out was Hadrosaurus falki, the first substantially complete dinosaur skeleton found in North America, and in 1868, the first mounted for public display anywhere in the world. But the mount is not the important part. Joseph Leidy, who described it, noticed the forelimbs were dramatically shorter than the hindlimbs and concluded the animal stood upright. Before that, the accepted picture of a dinosaur was a sprawling, rhinoceros-shaped lizard. Leidy's reading of these bones is where that changes. The modern image of a dinosaur, the upright bird-like one in every museum on Earth, begins in a marl pit in suburban New Jersey. In 1991, it became the state dinosaur, after a 4-year letter-writing campaign run by a 4th grade teacher and her students, number 17. Now the most recent thing to reshape New Jersey, and it only left about 21,000 years ago. The last ice sheet came down the Hudson, Passaic and Delaware valleys and stopped in a line running from Belvedere, past Morristown, out to Perth Amboy. That line is the terminal moraine, the exact southern edge of a continental glacier. You can drive across it without noticing. A low ridge of hummocky ground, most of it now under housing. But the ice did something else. Its debris plugged the water gaps in the Watchung Mountains, and the Passaic River had nowhere to go, so it backed up into a lake 30 miles long and 10 miles wide. Glacial Lake Passaic. When the ice retreated far enough to open a lower outlet, the lake dropped in stages, releasing about 2.5 cubic miles of water in one of them. Now go back to number 21. The Great Swamp is flat and wet because it is the floor of that lake. So are Troy Meadows and Great Peace Meadows. Northern New Jersey floods where it does because of where a glacier stopped. Number 16. Now the boundaries people drew on top of all this, and the first one is still on the road signs. In 1676, a legal document called the Quintipartite Deed split the colony in two. East Jersey facing the Hudson and New York, West Jersey facing the Delaware, and Philadelphia. Two governments, two separate systems of land ownership. The deed defined the border with two endpoints, one of which was a latitude nobody in 1676 could measure. In 1687, a surveyor named George Keith set out to run it, starting at Little Egg Harbor. He never finished. The governor of West Jersey objected that the line was veering too far west and taking too much of his province, and stopped the survey at the south branch of the Raritan. So the Keith line just ends, in the middle of the state, permanently. Everything after that was argument. Another line in 1743, a court ruling in 1855, and today, in Somerset and Mercer counties, there is a road called Province Line Road, with a marker explaining that it runs along the line George Keith surveyed in 1687. You can drive on a colonial property dispute, number 15, now something the state never intended to have. At about 2:45 in the morning on the 8th of September 1934, a fire started aboard the liner Morrow Castle on her way home from Havana to New York with 549 people on board. The Coast Guard's investigation never determined the cause. 134 people died. The memorial at Asbury Park lists 137, but the part nobody expects is what happened to the ship. Still burning, she drifted toward the Jersey shore and grounded a few hundred feet off the beach at Asbury Park, directly in front of Convention Hall, and then she stayed there. For months, in the middle of the Depression, a wrecked ocean liner sat on the sand at a Boardwalk resort, and people came from all over to look at her. The town sold the view. Vendors worked the crowd. Postcards were printed. The charred hull was finally towed away to be broken up for scrap. The one lasting thing to come out of it happened in Washington. Congress rewrote the fire rules for every passenger ship in the country. Insulated steel bulkheads, fire doors that close automatically, non-combustible escape routes. Every one of those exists because a ship burned in front of a New Jersey boardwalk and the country watched it happen. Number 14. New Jersey has 564 municipalities, 21 counties, and 564 separate local governments inside them. Other states have more. Pennsylvania has about 2,500. What makes New Jersey different is that there is no unincorporated land, none. Every square foot belongs to some municipality. There is nowhere in New Jersey that is not somebody's town. Most of it happened in one burst in the 1890s, in an episode local historians call boroughhitis, driven by fights over school funding and where the railroad would stop. And it almost never reverses. In the last century, New Jersey has uncreated exactly 2 municipalities. Princeton Borough merged with Princeton Township in 2013, and in 2022, Pine Valley Borough, essentially a golf club with a government, merged into Pine Hill. 566, then 565, then 564. Number 13. New Jersey's outer borders are stranger than its inner ones. In 1682, the Duke of York granted William Penn everything within a 12-mile circle around Newcastle, including the river and its soil. Not the middle of the river, all of it, out to the low water mark on the New Jersey side. That grant is still in force. The Supreme Court has confirmed it twice, in 1934 and again in 2008, which produces this. At a place called Kilcahook in Salem County, the Army Corps of Engineers has been dumping dredge spoil since 1898 and has built up 1,430 acres of new land on the New Jersey shore. Because the boundary is the historic low water mark, roughly a third of that new land is legally Delaware, physically attached to New Jersey, reachable only through New Jersey, with no road connection to Delaware at all. The township solicitor put it plainly. If a crime happened there, Delaware would have to be notified because the local police have no jurisdiction. The same logic runs the other way at Ellis Island. In 1998, the Supreme Court ruled the original 3 acres are New York, but the 24.5 acres of landfill around it are New Jersey. Both cases turned on the same thing, not where the water is, where the water used to be. Number 12. Now the reason New Jersey's cities are where they are, and it is one. Geological line. Running diagonally across the state is the fall line, where the hard rock of the Piedmont meets the soft sediment of the coastal plain. Rivers crossing it drop and become unnavigable above that point. So a boat coming up the Delaware stops at Trenton. A boat coming up the Raritan stops at New Brunswick. That is not a coincidence. It is the definition of a head of navigation. Cargo comes off the water onto land, which means warehouses, which means a market, which means a town. And the drop that stops the boat also turns a wheel. Every serious early industrial town in the northeast sits on that line for the same 2 reasons. The river stops being useful for shipping at exactly the point it starts being useful for power. Number 11. Which brings us to the most deliberate industrial city in American history. In 1791, Alexander Hamilton argued the United States had to build an industrial base rather than stay an agricultural exporter. Then he did something about it. That November, the New Jersey legislature chartered the Society for Establishing Useful Manufactures, and Hamilton, the sitting Treasury Secretary, personally drafted the charter. Then they picked the site, the Great Falls of the Passaic, in what became Paterson, because the falls could be made to do the work. And here is what they built. 2.5 miles of raceways on 3 tiers, cut into the rock above the falls. Water is diverted from the river, runs through the upper raceway, drops through a mill, falls to the middle raceway, drives another, falls again to the lower, drives a third, and returns to the Passaic below the falls. The same water works 3 times on its way down. At its height, that system powered roughly 60 separate mills and plants. Number 10. So what came out of it? Cotton first. Then the society stopped manufacturing altogether and became something more interesting. A landlord and a power utility, leasing water rights to anyone who wanted them. Which is why 60 companies ended up there instead of 1. In 1836, Samuel Colt opened his first firearms factory in Paterson, not Hartford, Paterson. Rogers Locomotive Works, also in Paterson, built over 6,000 locomotives. By the 1880s, according to the National Park Service, Paterson produced almost half of all the silk manufactured in the United States. they called it Silk City. And on the 22nd of May, 1878, an Irish schoolteacher named John Holland launched a 14-foot submarine into the Passaic River at Paterson, funded by the Fenian Brotherhood, who wanted a weapon to use against the British Navy. Holland went on to build the first submarine the United States Navy ever commissioned, one waterfall and a city that made revolvers, locomotives, half of America's silk, and the submarine. Number 9. Now the war that ran through New Jersey because of where it is. The British held New York. The Americans and the British fought over Philadelphia. New Jersey is the ground between them, and the roads connecting the two largest cities in the colonies ran across it. The National Park Service's own study counts 296 military engagements in New Jersey between 1775 and 1783, more than in any other colony. In 2006, Congress designated 14 New Jersey counties the crossroads of the American Revolution National Heritage Area. And the worst part of the war here was not a battle. The Continental Army wintered at Morristown in 1779, and that winter was harder than Valley Forge. More snowstorms, colder temperatures, thousands of men building log huts in a forest. Morristown became, on the 2nd of March 1933, the first National Historical Park in the United States. Number 8. At about 2 in the morning on the 30th of July 1916, a munitions depot on a pier in Jersey City exploded. The United States was neutral. It had been supplying Britain, and roughly 1,000 tons of war material was sitting there in rail cars and on barges because there were not enough ships to carry it away. German agents set it off. Windows shattered across lower Manhattan, Brooklyn and Hoboken. It was felt in Philadelphia. People in Maryland woke up thinking there had been an earthquake. You will hear it called a magnitude 5. The Richter scale was not invented until 1935, 19 years later. That is an estimate made long after the fact, not a measurement. The official death toll was between 4 and 7, and researchers have long argued it was higher, because there was an uncounted population living on barges in that anchorage, and then there is the piece of it still visible today. The Statue of Liberty is about a mile away. The National Park Service states it directly. Shrapnel embedded itself in the right side of the statue, the side facing the explosion, and the shock wave pushed the torch arm back against the crown, damaging the internal framework. The torch has been closed to the public ever since. Over a century later, nobody can go up there because of a sabotage operation carried out by a foreign government inside an American city, while that country was still at peace. Germany was found liable in June 1939, 11 weeks before it invaded Poland. The last payment cleared in 1979. Number 7. Go to the northern tip of the Jersey Shore, and there is a lighthouse. It was first lit on the 11th of June, 1764, paid for by a New York lottery, and petitioned for by 43 merchants tired of losing ships. It is the oldest operating lighthouse in the United States. In 1776, American forces tried to destroy it, so the British could not use it. Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Tupper reported that he found the walls, quote, so firm I could make no impression. It is still standing. It is still lit. Around it the Army built Fort Hancock, which guarded the approach to New York Harbor from the 1890s through the Cold War, and at the end of that run the site held Nike missiles between 1954 and 1974. One small sandy spit has been defending the same harbour with the technology of the moment since before the United States existed. Number 6, and that spit is getting longer. When the lighthouse was lit in 1764, it stood 500 feet from the tip of Sandy Hook. By 1864, the tip had moved more than 3/4 of a mile past it. Today it sits about 1.5 miles from the end. The mechanism is longshore drift. Waves hitting the northern Jersey shore at an angle push sand steadily northward. And Sandy Hook is what happens when that sand runs out of coast and keeps going into the bay. About 200,000 cubic yards move through the system every year. The state geologist wrote in 1885 that the hook had grown to more than 4 times the area it covered 2 centuries earlier. A lighthouse built to mark the end of the land is now 1.5 miles inland, and it never moved. Number 5, that sand comes from somewhere, and this is where it gets uncomfortable. In 1907, Congress authorized the Army Corps of Engineers to stabilize Cape May Inlet with 2 jetties, each 4,400 feet long. They worked, navigation improved, they also stopped the sand. Decades later, the Corps quantified what its own structures had done, and the finding is on the record in the Philadelphia District's official history. 76% of the shoreline erosion in the Cape May Meadows area is caused by the existing federal navigation works. The remaining 24% is natural. 3/4 of it was theirs. So now they buy the sand back. There's 650,000 cubic yards of replacement sand every 4 years for 50 years. That is not a cleanup. That is a permanent subscription. Number 4. And downdrift of those jetties, a town went into the water. South Cape May was incorporated on the 27th of August, 1894. It had a mayor and a tax roll and cottages. A nor'easter in 1936 destroyed many of the houses. The Great Atlantic Hurricane of September 1944 finished it. On the 30th of April 1945, the borough officially ceased to exist, and its land reverted to Lower Township. An incorporated American municipality was erased by the ocean and then formally dissolved by the state. It is now a 200-acre preserve and one of the best birding sites on the Atlantic Flyway. Remember number 14, where I said, New Jersey has uncreated exactly 2 municipalities in the last century? There was a third. The ocean did that one. Number 3. Now the thing that should not be possible. In the middle of the most densely populated state in America, there is a forest of about 1.1 million acres. The Pinelands National Reserve covers 22% of New Jersey's land area, across 7 counties and parts of 56 municipalities. The National Park Service calls it the largest body of open space on the mid-Atlantic seaboard between Richmond and Boston. The question is not what it is. The question is how it survived. The answer is soil chemistry. The Pine Barrens sits on coarse quartz sand laid down when this was seabed. Almost no clay and almost nothing in it that weathers into nutrients. Clay holds nutrients, quartz holds nothing. The soil pH runs between 3.6 and 5, and water drains through it almost instantly. You cannot farm that, not without continuous liming and fertilizing that was economically impossible in the 17 and 1800s. No agriculture means no farm economy, which means no towns, which means no roads, which means nothing to build on and no reason to. The proof is in what does grow there. The only crops that ever succeeded at scale in the Pine Barrens are cranberries and blueberries, both of which need acid soil, and both of which thrive on exactly the ground that defeats everything else. The forest that grew instead is built around fire. Pitch pine cones are sealed with resin that only melts in a crown fire, and the tree resprouts from buds inside its own trunk after losing every needle. And in the middle of it are about 15,000 acres called the Pine Plains, where mature adult trees are under 11 feet tall and in the most extreme stands 3 to 6 feet, not saplings, full-grown trees. That ground burns every 4 to 7 years, so the trees that survive are the ones that reproduce before they can grow tall. A forest that evolved to stay short because it burns too often to grow up. Underneath all of it is the Kirkwood-Cohensey Aquifer, holding an estimated 17 trillion gallons, enough to cover the entire state 10 feet deep. It is shallow and unconfined, so pumping it drains the streams and wetlands above it. That is the argument that won the political fight. You cannot separate the water from the land here because the aquifer is the ecosystem. In 1978, the federal government made it the first national reserve in the United States. The densest state in America has the largest protected open space between Richmond and Boston, and the reason is that the soil was too poor to be worth taking. Number 2. Now put it on one map. Rock 1 billion years old in the northwest, the southern edge of an ice sheet running through the suburbs, a lake bed that is now federal wilderness 30 miles from Times Square, foreign crust under the southern sand, a colonial survey line you can drive on, land that belongs to Delaware but touches only New Jersey, half of America's silk, the first submarine, a sabotage crater that closed the Statue of Liberty's torch, a lighthouse that is now 1.5 miles from the sea it was built to mark, a drowned borough, and 1.1 million acres of fire-adapted forest. New Jersey is 7,354 square miles. You could fit it into Montana 19 times. Every one of those things is inside it, and most of them are within 2 hours of each other. Number 1, people think New Jersey is the space between New York and Philadelphia. The reason it is so hard to describe is that there is no single New Jersey to describe. The Northwest is Appalachian Ridge country with a glacier's fingerprints on it. The Northeast belongs to one of the largest urban systems on Earth. The middle is where rivers stop being navigable, which is why the industry is there. South of that is a plain of sand too poor to farm, which is why the forest is there. And the eastern edge is barrier islands and marsh that move, and occasionally take a town with them. 5 different places, none of which explain the others, packed into the 5th smallest state in the country. The stereotype isn't wrong. It's just describing one small piece of the state. This has been States Explained. Thanks for watching, and remember, the map only ever shows you the top.